What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. And before I get into this video, I always like to remind you guys, if you want to contribute to my channel, you can do so in the links provided in the description box to PayPal or the Cash App. And also, if you want to listen to me talk about issues totally uncensored, unfiltered, please subscribe to my Patreon, where the link is also in the description box. Now, I want to talk about Eddie Murphy now. Of course, it was last week that we heard that supposedly, well, not supposedly, reportedly, I guess I should say, uh, Eddie Murphy was close to signing a very lucrative deal with Netflix for, I think it was a series of comedy uh, concerts. I think it was three of them for allegedly a total accumulating around $70 million. Very lucrative deal. I think Chris Rock and what's his name, Dave Chappelle, had signed deals worth around 60 million. So Freddie Murphy, the legend that he is, that's an appropriate figure. And I notice there's some people who doubt Eddie Murphy and doubt whether or not he can still be funny. And my thing is this: Eddie Murphy never comes across to me as a get off my lawn type guy. You know what I'm saying? I don't see him as the type of guy that always reminisce about the 80s and early 90s. You know what I'm saying? I think the guy's basically a fucking vampire. He doesn't really seem to age much. I think Eddie's about to be 58 this year, I think. So, I think he's a guy that stays up to date when it comes to concurrent topics to talk about. But I think, if anything, what people are making a mistake with Eddie Murphy is they're expecting Eddie Murphy to still sound like the same Eddie Murphy from the 80s. The delirious Eddie Murphy, the raw Eddie Murphy when he was in his early to mid 20s or late 20s. That's not the same person. This is a grown ass man now who's lived life, who's had his ups and downs. That was Eddie Murphy probably when he was at his most egotistical, because he really didn't have any downs. You know what I'm saying? That was Eddie Murphy coming off a string of hit movies, hit after hit after hit after hit. You know what I mean? Um, he even admitted he was pretty. And most people will tell you that around 1988 was probably the worst time to be around Eddie Murphy. Even though he played a character that was very chill and Akeem in Coming to America, in reality, the guy was an egomaniac. I think Eddie Murphy has changed a lot since then. He's a superstar. Well, he's a celebrity, I'll put it like that. So he's always going to have some level of ego. But I think that he's probably changed a lot since then. He's gone through a lot of trials and tribulations. We all know. I don't have to go into that. Um, I think that he probably will be a lot more uh, self-effacing. I think he'll probably be a lot more self-deprecating in a uh, comedy routine or stand-up routine or a show. And I don't think that his material would just consist of. First of all, he would have to adjust to the times. I mean, if you look at his routine back then and some of the jokes he made, I don't really have to go too far into it. He couldn't pull off some of the same jokes now. So his routine is going to have to be a little bit different. But every great comedian can adjust, in my opinion. Okay, every great comedian can adjust. Eddie Murphy can be the foulest comedian in the world, as was his predecessor and mentors, Richard Pryor and Red Fox. But they could also play blue or clean humor and still be hilarious. So Eddie Murphy can adjust to the situation. So that's not a problem to me. Uh, as far as his stand up, I think his stand up will be fine. He might need to earlier on, and this is a friend of mine told me this, and this is uh, a good suggestion actually. Maybe earlier on, as he find his comedy feet, or get his footing down, maybe he could request the help of some writers or some friends, some guys that have comedy style and similar to Eddie Murphy, guys that he know are funny. I think that eventually he'll get it down, and I think he'll do good. I think he'll do good, but people have to resist the temptation of comparing these concerts to what he did 30 years ago. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the temptation people have of comparing everything Jackie Gleason did to The Honeymooners, or every movie Orson Welles produced to Citizen Kane. It's an unfair thing to do. You know what I mean? I think it's just unfair to compare everything that someone does to what was considered or is considered their masterpiece. But I think Eddie Murphy will do fine. Now, as far as some other things with Eddie Murphy, I know that he has a movie coming out, Coming to America too. Now, I just saw that Arsenio Hall agreed to reprise his role as Simi, which is big. And basically, what the script is saying now is that Akeem is going to come back to America to discover a long lost son that he didn't know about, and to have this son uh, claim his heir as the ascending future ruler of Zamunda. So a lot of people were saying that sounded a little hackneyed, saying like a overplayed plot device or whatever. I don't know. Then some people were saying like, well, wait a minute, wasn't he the innocent, you know, relatively virginal king, prince, excuse me, of Zamunda when he found Lisa? And I mean, this could have happened. First of all, we don't know how that marriage played out. Maybe it didn't work out for them. You hope that it did. Maybe you hope that she appears in this movie because we all love Lisa McDowell. I know I loved Lisa McDowell back then. Hubba hubba. What fucking year I come from? 1958. But but I mean, it could be from some situation, some tryst that he had with a woman back then. It could be that maybe Lisa McDowell left him. She, because we all remember she had issues with, you know, even considering being like it was all too fast for her, like, you know, being the queen of Zamunda and all this, like, the princess of Zamunda, whatever. I don't know if I could deal with that. So maybe she had second thoughts about it and she couldn't handle the situation, and maybe she left Akeem. But what Akeem didn't know is that she was a couple of months pregnant with their son, and maybe she kept it from him. Maybe she wanted to live a private life. I mean, there are certain things that can get around with that. You know what I'm saying? But I think the movie will do well. I saw it's right now slated to come out in December of 2020. So I think they'll do a good job with it, man, and I think they'll do the movie justice. There are enough people that's going to come out to watch that movie that it's going to do very well, I think. And I also want to say this in conclusion with this video, man. Eddie Murphy's a guy who I think realizes that his shot is right now for the second act of his life. Okay. What I mean by that is Eddie Murphy has long stated that he had a phobia about coming back to stand up. There's a part of him that wanted to do it, but he had this fear that he may not be able to do it anymore. But I think that his itch to get out there was just becoming too overwhelming. And I really root for the guy because I really don't like how the media treat Eddie Murphy. Because more often than not, I mean, generally speaking, he seemed like a decent guy. He's not one of these big, true assholes like Sean Penn, you know what I'm saying, who has a history of treating the paparazzi and the media pretty harshly, but yet the media still handles him with somewhat kid gloves. But Eddie Murphy, every movie he's been in has been trashed, which I don't understand. Yes, he's appeared in some horrible movies. Yes, he has. Pluto Nash was fucking horrible. Okay, even I can't even defend that shit. But some of these movies that people consider bad, I'm like, they're not bad movies. Norbit was funny. I don't understand people who say that Norbit sucked. It was funny as shit. But what it is that Norbit is a black comedy. And a lot of white people, I'm sorry to say, they don't get black humor. It always infuriates me when they say certain movies aren't funny. You don't understand our humor. Harlem Nights to me, first of all, it wasn't a box office dud. I remember reading some of the reviews as I got older for Harlem Nights when it came out, and they called it a box office dud because I think it failed to make $100 million, which was like at the time was sort of like the standard for what would consider be a blockbuster. They couldn't wait to see Eddie Murphy fail. They wanted to shut his arrogant mouth up. You know what I'm saying? And the way they did it was they overdid it as far as being critical of his movies. They said Harlem Nights wasn't funny and that it was a box office disaster. How in the fuck is a movie that makes 3 times what his budget was, okay, and is considered an urban classic, a failure? It's not. Boomerang was not a failure. I think Vampire in Brooklyn is a very funny movie. Now, does it shine as much as say The Golden Child or the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the first two, or Coming to America, Trading Places, 48 Hours? You know what I'm saying? Is it as great or as good as those movies? No, those movies are like legendary. Like Eddie Murphy was putting up like goddamn Oscar worthy comedies, but they still were good in their own right. And Eddie Murphy always elevates a bad script. He always elevates a bad script. Now, the one movie that was a disappointment to me that Eddie appeared in and various others is Life, because you look at that roster, you had Eddie Murphy, you had Martin Lawrence, you had Bernie Mac, Joaquin Woodbine, who can be a very good comic actor, and various others. I forget his name, but he has a funny name. It's an African name. He played the dean in How High. He was the one that's actually narrating the film. You have this talented roster of great African American actors, and the movie was so-so. It was funny, but wasn't funny as I thought it would be. You know, but this is a guy who has always been around, and yes, he's had some bad movies, but he's had some great movies. Now, The Professor comes to mind. Very, very funny and worthy remake of Jerry Lewis's classic movie. But they overdo it with criticizing his movie choices. Like I did a video several years ago where I talked about how on a per movie basis, Eddie Murphy's movies gross higher than Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone since 1994, which is considered like the downside of Eddie Murphy's career. Like post Boomerang, Uh, after that period of time, 93 going to 94, where it seemed like all of Eddie Murphy's movies just didn't do well, apparently. He outgrossed per movie Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone during that time period. Yet you don't hear the same criticisms with those two individuals that you heard from Eddie Murphy. So that's it, man. I root for Eddie. I wish him nothing but the best. I think he's going to do great. And I think there's going to be a very successful second act for Murphy, and we'll see. But